going to need jiu-jitsu going into 2025. But all right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Take a Knee. Our first one here in 2025. Taking a break as we let things play and settle out, which kind of brings us to topic of the discussion today. And not that we have any particular insights onto what's going on. It's just we do have people asking us like, hey, there's going to be could be more transitions in the future, and whether it's a military transition or a federal transition or even just a corporate transition for military retirees, you're always in that or being a veteran, we're always in this small subset of our greater population. So it's all these financial questions, future career questions are going to apply differently. And that's kind of our main theme, whether it's at US VetWealth or Blue Water Advisors or through Trevor's Military Money Mistakes, is just saying, hey, always remember what you have uniquely going for you and try to lean into those benefits. So glad to have you guys both with us this morning to talk through both from Mike's perspective, the career, getting back into the job finding world. What are some things to think about there? And then when it comes to the financial aspect of it, Trevor's recently went through he's put together a federal employee retirement planning course and such, and you've gotten the full certification for that, correct, Trevor?
So I went out. I became qualified as obtained the Chartered Federal Employee Benefits Consultant certification. I'm still trying to take what I did with Military Money Mistakes, and I'm working on translating that over to the federal sector, because overall there's a lot of similarities, but there's also some pretty significant differences between like FERS and the military retirement system.
Right. Well, any quick thoughts or top of mind things or discussion points either you wanted to hit on, to kind of get the ball rolling on, what are some things we could hit on today?
Well, I've got a couple of thoughts, Scott. 2025, here we come, right? I mean, it's hard to believe, man. We already are into February, right? So we're quickly approaching halfway through Q1, which just already kind of blows my mind. But Steve Weeman and I were talking the other day, and we just finished our trip. As you know, we were down in Florida, right at Orlando, in support of Knock TSD down there for a 2-day cohort. And that base is a unique base down there, largely made up of federal employees, right? So you'll have a command down there, much like the one that we supported, that has 35 uniformed officers made up of almost 1,300, government employees, right? So as we were down there, these new executive orders were coming out, and you can imagine there is a lot of churn, right, in the workforce down there. Hey, do I have to come back and be in person, or can I continue to work remote? Well, it looks like we're trying to pull everybody back in. Early out options, right, for Scott, you and Trevor, that's probably, man, especially if you're dealing with the federal workforce out there, that's, man, I'm going to get paid all the way through September, but maybe I take this early out option, right? And a lot of things to consider, and needing help to navigate that because it's coming out right now. And then on the uniform side, right, our senior leadership managing a lot of these commands, it's like, hey, you're telling me I got to bring the workforce all back in, but I don't even have enough buildings or seats to put everybody in. So maybe I'm constrained at that point, but now if everybody takes the early out, well, maybe I do have enough seats for everybody, right? So there's just a lot of flux. And then hold that thought. But for our membership that come through, that we walk them through designing their career progression and doing their market analysis. Now let's look at the government contracting side of things. Let's look at the defense aerospace industry. Those companies also are going through a lot of change, right? They are aligning, right, with the direction of their military, right, and DEI programs specifically. If you log on to a lot of sites, Booz Allen or Boeing or Northrop Grumman or Lockheed Martin, there's changes to their website going on in real time, trying to fall in line in many instances with what the federal government's doing, right, and some of these executive orders. So, yeah, it is complicating things a little bit. And some industries, right, in the defense aerospace, Boeing in particular, a lot of these companies are continuing to go through some challenges. But as the new administration now gets its feet underneath this, investing back in the military, what is that going to look like? So, all of that said, is 2025, here we are, right? Lots of uncertainty, lots of new things happening. But I think the big takeaway, and I'd love to know what you guys think, at least from our side, hey, the blocking and tackling and the basics are still pertinent to your success. Don't stop having a well thought out design. Don't stop doing your market analysis, assessing what is going to be a good fit for you, right? All of these things we talked about when there was certainty out there are absolutely still valid, even in an uncertain environment. In fact, I would argue doing your market analysis now more important than ever before. Look before you jump. Understand what's the state of play in that industry and company that you're pursuing. So I'd love to know what you guys think about that. But that's, man, just over the last 6 weeks, that's what we're seeing, and it's all happening fairly rapidly.
Yeah, because I mean, on the defense side of things, I mean, the federal government's big. Coming out of the military, we're used to always being in the defense side of it, and I'm curious to see how much of that's going to be affected, both on the federal side and the contracting, because it sounds like a lot of the corporations were also having their own downsizing just from financial or management stuff in prior months leading up to this, anyways. But Trevor, yeah, what are your kind of initial thoughts on all this?
Yeah, I've actually had, over the last 2 days, I've had several conversations with people who have reached out to me who were curious about that. So, I think Mike's talking a lot about, hey, once you've made the decision, like, what are you doing? I'm looking at like, hey, okay, does it make sense to make this decision? What are some of the criteria you're looking at? A lot of people are curious about, from a numbers perspective, like, hey, how does this affect my retirement planning? And then the other big one, the big question that we deal with a lot is, hey, once I leave the federal government, what do I do with my retirement savings, right? The FERS and the TSP is usually the big one, because there's just, there's so little education out there about like all of your options. Some people will tell you about one or the two. A lot of times they just get told to leave it in TSP with no, and the reason they give you for that is they say, well, it has low fees. Well, you're disregarding a whole bunch of other factors that you need to take into consideration for making a decision that's important as that. So, the last couple of days, I've had multiple calls with people where we've kind of walked through things, and I've shared, some perspectives and some resources that they can use to help really make a truly well-informed decision about what to do. As far as making that decision, what do I do with all my retirement stuff after that?
Yeah. So the uncertainty here is going to be around making the financial decision. Hey, is it going to be, what can happen in this buyout? I mean, if someone does take it right now and they've got 8 months, and they're thinking about what they want to do next, Mike, what are, if it's, because maybe it's not just about the numbers, and it's more about, hey, this is an opportunity for me to find a better fit, one way or the other. And so, what are some things to think about, because there is a timeline now, kind of like military retirement. Once you drop your paperwork, what that's going to look like. So maybe rehash, Mike, actually I'll ask both of you individually, with that kind of a 8-month timeline, if someone does want to execute sooner than later, or waiting until they just get laid off or something, what are some things to think about with that in mind?
This is an interesting time, and I'm so glad I got both of you guys on here, because we, on occasion, right? I mean, Blue Water's brand, right? I think you guys get it, right? I mean, and I'll just regurgitate very quickly, right? Our membership over the last 4 years is growing in large numbers, right? But we are still about 85% Navy, 15% other services, 50% when it comes to seniority. 50% of our members are those very senior 06s, right? We have about 25% those senior 05s, right? And then that's math in public, never do it. But whatever I have left, what is that? 25% is made up of a fast growing, quickly growing 07 and above contingent. And then those 03s, 04s that are hitting that first 10 or 12 year off ramp, right? So if you look at our entire membership, just in general, that's what it looks like. We do on occasion, though, have GSs reach out to us, right? And they say, hey, is this process, will it work for anybody? And the answer is yes, right? I mean, we have a process, and we do target our message to, that grouping that I just described. But the process and how to navigate this is absolutely valid with that demographic, that workforce of federal employees. So you guys can imagine, right? Like, I love that you were there and you can address, hey, what do I do with my savings? How do I approach this? And there are going to be some, I think you would agree, that say, hey, you know what? I'm just going to take early retirement and man, I'm done. But I would imagine there's a large portion of the workforce that goes, hey, I was planning on working for another 8 or 10 years, right? And if I can't do it in the federal government, maybe this is a great opportunity to take advantage of this early out. But now I need a program that's going to help navigate me to my next success. Listen, push them to us, right? I think the process, I believe in it. I know it will work. We've done it in the past with not large numbers of GSs, but some. And a lot of our workforce, that come to us, active duty members, right? We do have about 8 to 9% of those individuals that seek GS roles. So we've got some insight into that, and that network would grow. But if you listen, it is absolutely a valid process, and I think it would apply to them as well. So, and Scott, what we put them through. You understand the mindset. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, I think it would. We put people through the process, and you can navigate to whatever it is you want to navigate to. And we can help you understanding what is a good fit and what do you want to secure in this next phase in your life. And then let's build the networking bridge to get there, and let's get you there. It'll work.
Yeah, I think the main shocking factor, coming out of the military, what your next job is going to be, what your career path, can be, unless you're getting medically retired or you can pretty much have control over that. And that's what the assumption always was with federal employment, that, that was kind of a guaranteed job. So this is the first time, I think, in that uncertainty's crept up. But given that there is some sort of off ramp, it feels more like it can translate to a military retirement style transition. All right.
Absolutely.
You're still young. The world's changing. Obviously, there's a lot more opportunities out there, but you're going through a program like yours, or having time, many months as opposed to weeks, to really find the right fit. So it's not just, that's the one thing I think all of us could say we've learned in this space is it's not about the money. An extra 20,000 here or there a year, it doesn't really move the needle as much as we assume it does. It's, exploring, bigger options out there, industries you haven't considered, types of employment you hadn't considered, whether that's self-employment or working for a startup.
Lot of them, Scott, right? It might be the freedom, right? Because some of those individuals are retired military. They've stepped in now to a GS role, and now they've got an option to take some kind of an early out and step out. And maybe that's just enough freedom in their life to go, hey, you know what? The war chest is kind of secure, but I still need to pad it a little bit. But man, I've always wondered, right, about working in this industry or this company. Mm-hmm. Or man, I always was excited about venture capital, private equity opportunities. Or I was always excited. Hey, I would love to find a great nonprofit to get into. Maybe it's enough freedom now for them, right, to say, hey, I wonder if I could get well, the answer is yes. If you're bringing that type of experience to the table, it's all just about the network, and we have the network to plug them into. So I would welcome an opportunity to work with some of these GSs that are looking for their next, success, as we like to say. I think the process would work.
Cool. Trevor, what about from, with that 8 months, in mind, just using that as an anchor, because that's kind of the only data point we do know, or at least that's been thrown out there. Where, and if we think about GSs, and compare them to various ranks in the military, the benefit systems work differently. What are the priorities of the various things they should be looking at that they could address?
Well, I would say first and foremost, figuring out what you're going to do next. That's always kind of the big thing that a lot of people who are getting out of the military have to look at. Hey, what's next for me? I came across this graphic the other day that I thought was really good. It said, hey, here's where you're at, starting point, right? And then you want to skip over to where it is that you want to be. Like, what is your goal? You have to define what that is before you can come back to the middle and make steps to progress towards that goal, right? So I think that's primarily figuring out, like, hey, what's next for me? And then to kind of get into making some of those steps, some of the big things, obviously make sure that your finances are in order, kind of review everything. You do the basic, income and expenses evaluation, try to trim out anything that's unnecessary, because, it's possible that after you leave that job, maybe you're still searching for something afterwards. So you want to make sure you have that solid foundation. The next thing to do would be to look at all of your benefits and say, hey, okay, these things are all going away, right? How do I transition to the next phase? How do I replace those benefits? Looking at, like, obviously health insurance is a big one. For those of you who are retired military, probably not as big of a deal. For somebody who's not retired military, retirement funds, obviously that's kind of the one that we look at, retirement planning. And then probably another one that's really important that we kind of look at a lot is, how do I protect all that stuff?
Yeah. Right? Could you talk about FEGLI? Like, a lot of federal employees, take the FEGLI option just kind of as assumption as it's part of the benefits package. And so if that's going away, that often isn't replaced at a new corporation for the same level of value. Well, it won't be as uncertain, because if you end up moving to a new corporation, then you're just going to be in the same. If you have to go through 2 new jobs, that's just going to happen over and over again. So what's the opportunity there in regards to FEGLI?
Well, the big thing with FEGLI is I don't think we have enough time today to dive into all the aspects of FEGLI, because it's not just one thing. Like, SGLI is just one thing. I get SGLI and then I have spousal SGLI. FEGLI is a little different animal. It has different parts. But essentially, wherever you go, your next employer will probably have, if you understand what it is, it's a group life insurance policy.
Federal employee group life insurance. That's what FEGLI means. Sorry.
Yeah. So, it's just like in the civilian sector, they have group life insurance plans as well. Typically, it's a multiple of your income. Some companies do 1 or 2 years. I've seen some that do 10 years. Typically, those you might have to qualify for those on an individual basis. But, a lot of the times, if you're relatively healthy and you're willing to go through the underwriting process, you can go out and find an individual life insurance policy that will provide you with more coverage for less money. The thing about FEGLI is it's part of a plan to protect your financial security if something happens to you. It won't do it just by itself. It's the same thing with survivor benefit plan. It's part of something, but it won't, if you're counting on that to protect your family's financial security after your military retirement, I got some bad news for you. It's probably not going to happen. It's a component of an overall plan. But again, like we talk about with survivor benefit plan all the time, usually the private sector has better options that are more cost effective and, are not just a one trick pony. They do other things for you. One of the big emergences that's happened over the last several years is a lot of term insurance policies, in addition to giving you a lot of coverage for the least amount of premium, also have some sort of living benefit attached to it too. So if you have some kind of chronic illness, terminal illness, whatever, you're able to use some of those benefits before you pass away. So that's a huge one. The downside to that is obviously the term is going to expire eventually. And then if you try to renew it, it's going to be a lot more expensive. And then you look at like, okay, what's the compromise there? Well, what we find a lot of the times, Scott and I, when we're working with military retirees, is it's usually a combination of term and permanent insurance that tends to, be the best fit for a lot of people, especially military retirees, because they're going to get out and make twice what they were making while they were in the military. Their income has expanded significantly. That also means they have to protect that income. And so the $500,000 SGLI or VGLI just ain't going to cut it. Same thing with FEGLI too, right? It's not going to protect all of your security. And obviously wherever you go next, your next employer's group plan, probably not going to do that as well. So again, that's part of one of those steps between here's where I'm at now, here's where my goal, build the solid foundation, evaluate the benefits that you have, and then, start taking action on that. Because this is something I encounter a lot. 8 months is not a lot of time to do all this stuff, especially when you look at the multitude of tasks that you're going to have to do. You got to dust off the resume. You got to get back to networking. You got to go out and figure it out what is that you want to do. And then you have to squeeze in all these other little things that I'm talking about in between that. So, people say, well, I've got 8 months. Well, 6 months from now, you're going to be like, wow, I really should have spent a little bit more time getting ready for this because it's coming up quick.
Yeah, I guess.
Well, I'm sorry,
Mike.
Scott, go ahead. No, I was going to say, Trevor, that's a great point. And we share personal insight with our members. Every single person who walks through our door always thinks that the closer they get to stepping out, the more time available they will have. And in fact, we all know the reality, right? You have a growing competing interest with exiting government employment, like figuring out all these forms, and on the uniform side, DD 214 and medical and all these kind of things, where in execution, you actually have much less time available to devote to looking for your next success the longer you wait. Now, what we have found analytically 4 years ago, I would say just start early, 2 years, 3 years out, immerse yourself in some program. And that is the key to success for you to lead turn the demand signal of what's going to be required for you to navigate to your next success. And in actuality, over the last 4 years, analytically, I can tell you that's probably not the determining factor. Stating the obvious, don't wait until you're stepping into terminal leave or the week before you leave federal service. Horrible plan. You won't have a lot of time available. But if you do start 2 years in advance, if you start it, immerse yourself in some program like a Blue Water or a Rulin or a TAP or whatever, the federal government's going to offer people. that's great. But if you touch it and get educated and do nothing with that education for 2 years, that also is bad. Historically, what are we starting to see? What we like to tell our members now is about the 6 to 8 month point, immerse yourself in knowledge, right? What is going to be required of me? How do I target a resume? What are some of the AI tools that will help me do this? Do I need to now start building my network? Where do I want to go? What are the big rocks in my life that I want to preserve? What market analysis do I need to accomplish to get to my next success? Understand the tools, immerse yourself in that environment 6 to 8 months prior. But then here's the difference. Do this, right? You're dedicating 8 to 10 hours a week, right, towards this next success. I can tell members when they walk through the door, our senior leadership, 05s, 06s, they all want to know, how long is it going to take me, Mike? Hey, Mike, I think I can get a job in a couple of weeks. I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to be right there with you, right? But analytically, I'm going to look you in the eye and say, I can now look at 400 members who have just looked just like you, who have gone from start to finish. And on average, it's going to take you 129 days. And they're like, no, Mike, 4 months, 9 days, I'm going to get a job a lot quicker than that. Okay, I'm not saying that you won't, but I'm just saying statistically, based on these individuals who look just like you, who are pursuing these industries and companies, this is how long it's going to take you. So the difference to driving that number down is that 6 to 8 month point. Immerse yourself in what's required and get going on it, right? Use it, touch it every week, right? As you go through it. I love that you guys are here and have that insight on building the war chest and protecting your income, and that insight on what to do, because, and then you alluded, Trevor, is just like, hey, how do I design my plan? Where do I want to go? What's a good fit? How do I know if it's a good fit? Send them to us, right? I can help them navigate. That is what we do. And we have the network for them to plug into. It just is a great 1-2 punch, right? So for the audience that may be listening out there, if you're a federal employee and you're thinking about some of these things, conversations are free. Reach out to us and have a conversation about how we can help you navigate this awkward time, right? That is what we do. And I think what we're creating as a nation, the executive orders with our federal workforce, is very much, Scott, like what you said. This is a senior leader about 8 months prior from retiring from a 25 or 30 or 30 plus year career. The analogies are very similar, right? And the steps to go through to navigate to your next success, I think are very, very similar, right?
I think real quick, Mike touched on something that I encounter a lot talking to people, that whole bias of, oh, that's not going to happen to me. Yeah. And then of course, on the other side of that, they find out, oh, this could happen to me. Right. So if that's your train of thought, oh, this person, all those people are dumb. They're not as smart as me. They haven't put as much thought into it as me. Understand that is a cognitive error, personal bias, whatever you want to call it. And when you understand that it can happen to you, that's really the best surefire way to, you're never going to necessarily 100% prevent it, but you can be prepared for it.
Yeah.
And that's what, I see that a lot. A lot of people think, well, it's not going to happen to me. So they never prepare for that eventuality. And then they find themselves worse off than they ever thought they could be.
Yeah. And I think the opportunity here to prepare for that is not to assume doom and gloom, but to just recognize, hey, the federal system, whether it's military or federal employment, is completely different than entering the corporate world. So if you've been in federal employment for a while, or if you went from military straight into federal, like even just applying for a job, there is no USA jobs for the civilian world, right? The way that you write resumes for the government jobs is completely different. So, and then the networking aspect of it, just getting out there and talking to people. If you haven't had a need to think to network in the civilian space in that capacity, those are the risks I think Trevor's talking about. And then from the benefit side of things, maybe you're not planning on taking this buyout, or you feel pretty secure, this might be an opportunity to reevaluate all those things, because you still just don't know, right? And we always know retirement's coming someday anyway. So not being assuming that everything I had set up years and years ago is going to keep working going forward. Just, whether it's this big administrative shift or AI, I also think the financial system in general has been changing for a while, and we don't know what that's going to look like, whether or not Bitcoin's going to be the reserve or how the dollar is going to work anymore. So we just have a lot of changes coming up in all aspects of life. And, all we can do is take advantage of the fact that as veterans, as military retirees, you've got a leg up. That's what you served for. You've earned it. So tap into that network and that previous knowledge of folks out there like us that might be able to be someone to chat with as you're thinking through all these uncertainties coming up. But
no, it's a great call out, Scott, and I think for all of us, it kind of ramps up the angst, if you will, if that's an appropriate word, right? We're not living in fear of it, but there is this kind of is the pace at which it's happening. I mean, it's happening rather quickly, right? It's all unfolding for all of us right in front of us, and you're like, holy cow, this is moving rapidly.
I was just thinking, I mean, trying to start business, be self-employed, like I've kind of always felt that angst like daily for years and years, and got used to it. Just, that's life. Hey, where do you get food? Got to put food on the table, and as former leaders in the military, I think we like the challenge a little bit. We lean into it. That's when people talk about what are your strengths coming out of the military, it's dealing with that. So don't forget that. Don't forget what you've learned in that kind of past experiences. But Trevor, any other thoughts you wanted to share?
No, I know it's a big decision to make. You got a lot of things to consider. I guess probably the best advice that I can give you is to make one that's truly well-informed and be prepared for the eventuality that your train of thought could be wrong, and know what to do when that happens.
All right, guys. Well, I think we just wanted to get out and talk about some of the ideas that are coming up, and we'll keep this topic top of mind, and as we learn more, or as we're talking to more people and figure out kind of what questions they're asking what's coming up most. Let us know your thoughts and questions as always, and we can dive in deeper as we know more about what's most relevant. But all right, I think that's all we got for today.
Thanks,
we will wish everybody a great rest of the week.
Great. Talk again soon.
All right. Take care, guys.